Well, everyone, hello everyone, Pro College Planners Nations. This is Craig Coles, one of the co-founders of Pro College Planners. I am here this evening on this great Thursday evening to be your sort of tour guide on this college planning endeavor that you guys are looking
All right, good
to
evening and
take on.
welcome on
This may be
this
your
happy
first,
Thursday,
maybe
October
another
14th.
webinar
I
you've
just
attended,
wanted
but we're
to
certainly
welcome
glad that you're here
everybody
this
here
evening.
to our
But the
event
amazing thing
tonight
is I'm
about
actually
how
going
to
to
pay for
be
college in the most effective
working
ways
with
possible
you
to keep more of.
on oops, let me exit the video here. There we go. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be have my partner come on through a recorded video that we used. So it's he's much better than I am, and he's much more articulate than I am in doing this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to replay him, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of chat after the event's over. So it's a replay. It was a really good one that he did a couple weeks ago. But what I'm going to do is just go ahead and start that webinar and get him to explain to you exactly who we are, what we do, how we help people, and if it's any benefit for you. So again, my name is Craig Coles. I'm going to start this video, and I will get back with you at the end of the event.
All right, good evening and welcome on this happy Thursday, October 14th. I just wanted to welcome everybody here to our event tonight about how to pay for college in the most effective ways possible to keep more of your money for yourself and ultimately continue to have wealth for your retirement, all the things that really matter for you. My name is Douglas Hagren, and I'm with Pro College Planners, and we're going to talk a little bit more about who we are and what we do as we get into this tonight. Giving a few seconds here for our minutes here for some other additional people to join. I see a lot of people are starting to click on here as we go forward with our presentation tonight. We're in the middle of FAFSA season. The clock opened up on October 1st, which again, if you aren't familiar with what I'm talking about here, we're going to get into those terms as well as many others as we go tonight. A little bit of homework for the evening, or a little bit of rules and for regulations for the evening. We are going to go through this information. We're going to go through it fast, obviously, because we are sensitive to the time. It's a weeknight. Many of you have lots of things going on, sports and other activities, as well as school tomorrow and work tomorrow. In addition, you're going to probably hear stuff that you may have questions about, and sometimes many questions. So go ahead, feel free to put those into the chat box. We're going to try to be able to answer those here. Some of those will be answered as we go, and some of those will be answered at the end, which we will have a Q&A that we will participate in when we get done with our information here. So I want to go ahead and start. For those of you that are just joining on, it's always helpful. We've got kids that are and families that are all over the country, matter of fact, all over the world, that we get to attend these webinars that we do, that we're learning to try to figure out, and no matter where you are, how does things function in this college landscape in the United States. So because of that, we talk to a lot of families that have older kids, younger kids. So I'm going to give a little bit of a poll here, get started, to see if anybody has given us, or anybody here has some seniors, maybe some juniors, sophomores, freshmen. I'm going to go ahead and give a second here for those of you that have joined to go ahead and give some feedback, and then I will provide some, kind of an idea to me about some of the information we need to know about who you are, and so that we can make sure that we address that as tonight goes. So far it looks like I am seeing that there is, let's see here, We are starting to see that there are some seniors, some juniors. That is typical. Some late stage college planning. We see some sophomores, freshmen. I see a couple of freshmen coming in here too. So again, the information we're going to be talking about tonight is going to be valuable for all ages. I would like to also go ahead and take a look at another poll that we've got here. Just how ready you are for college right now. It helps to give us an idea of where you're at and how urgent this information is for you. Now, we have individuals who have been to our webinars before who kind of just trying to make sure everything they thought they knew turned out to be true. And then there's a lot of individuals who just are getting started and don't know. So I'm starting to see some information come in here that tells me we've got a good split, that there is looks to be some individuals who are almost there but need some polishing. Okay, but also looks like we got a couple of people that's a dumpster fire. And we call this the late stage college funding pressure cooker. And we do find that from a lot of people that join into our webinar. So again, see some more people that have come on here. My name is Douglas Hagren, and I'm going to get going because we've got a lot of information to cover tonight. But before I do, this is a great opportunity to take a screenshot in case for some reason you have to drop off or things happen. We are located, our main headquarters is in Richardson, Texas, but I myself am located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've got individuals scattered on the East Coast and West Coast. So we've got individuals helping people all over the country. But if you need to reach us, support at procollegeplanners.com. Our phone number, our website is on here as well. So grab that screenshot. And as we move on, what we are talking about tonight is cutting the cost of college planning. And many of you are here because you're concerned, that you're nervous about what it is that you are facing when it comes to this college funding landscape. And so with that, we understand that there is a lot of pressure on you and a lot of pressure with what is going on with colleges, and the cost of college has gone up tremendously. So we're going to give you some keys tonight of the ways that you can reduce that cost and that bill and help you to get to a place where you're not going to feel as much concern and pressure. And listen, there is a consistent response in surveys that are published year to year. College is something that parents feel is an investment, for their child's future. If their children have a good outcome in college, their hope is that they will have, in many cases, a better life than we as parents have lived ourselves. That's the dream of every parent. And as you can see here, that about 80% plus consistently feel that this is indeed important to invest in. So therefore, families are doing a lot, taking on a lot of money and doing whatever they can, thinking that they are doing something for the best welfare of their child, which indeed there is definite correlation. But if you are feeling stressed, worry not. There are ways that we can bring the cost of college down and help you to figure out key ways to pay for it. Now, what are we going to cover tonight? We're going to cover the problem that you feel, the stress that you feel, the cost that you're seeing that are going up, the rules that you feel that are being presented to you on how to play this game, much of which are being put out there for you to try to play and you don't have to. We're also going to talk about the reducing the cost of college while you're here and what is the perceived problem. But what we will not get as far into tonight, but I will touch on this maybe a little bit, is how to actually pay for college, how to pay and perhaps even get a full refund, and what ultimately is the real problem that people are facing. Now, when it comes to college, there is about 12 key areas and responsibilities that families have to be focused on that fall kind of on the plate of the student, the parents, or both. And you can see some of these here. The student has to understand those college options that are out there. Many of them don't know what they don't know. They've got to prep for those college admissions, get things ready, simple things, sometimes as easy as get your social media cleaned up, because colleges are looking at this and it matters when they're taking a look at who they're going to let in and not. Gain self-awareness about who you are, that there is many students that are going into college. Where do you stand, and what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And then get in the right mindset, because this is a marathon, and ultimately it's going to take something that's going to be an investment of time, an investment of focus, an investment of money. and it's going to be continuing into college and beyond. Now, the parents obviously have to figure out the financial parts of it. Financial aid, EFC, retirement readiness is critical, as well as calculating cash flow. Then the family can come together and figure out what those scholarship opportunities are, what those right colleges are, how to understand those rewards, and transition ultimately to college successfully, which is easier for some than others. So who is this for? Well, it is for families with plenty of money saved or high cash flow, don't want to overpay and want to keep more of the money. But it is also for families that have little saved and families just starting to save that may have younger kids who have children already in college or may have graduated with existing loans. In fact, some of the things we're going to talk about are going to be important for pretty much anybody in any situation who is dealing with, about to, or has already with college. Now, we know that there is real concerning data out there. If you can see here, the average cost of college is a whopping $35,000 plus per year, and that has tripled in 20 years. The annual growth rate of 5.8% well exceeds what is typical inflation, maybe not the inflation we're seeing in the last 12 months, but typically it is almost 2 to 1. And the average in-state student, even though it is supposed to be cheaper college, is spending around $25,000 a year. The average private university student as much as 53. And you can see what this has led to. You can see student loan debt. This is off of the government's debtclock.org, but you can see that per student, the average out there is about $40,000 in debt for college, and it is growing. In fact, in communities where families have send more kids to college, there is a correlation to more defaults in years past college, and that is because more and more older families are taking on more and more debt to attack this rising cost. In fact, as you can see here, the cost over 5 years for an in-state could be as much as $130,000, out of state $219,000, and for 4 years of private school, roughly about the same for a private school as an out of state. And you might have thought that was a typo. We are not kidding when we say 5 years, because you can see here that just 39% of students graduate within 4 years. State schools are the worst at this. And ultimately, these are the costs that the average student is paying even after getting scholarships and financial aid. But here's a hint. Most families out there aren't getting near what they could because they're going about the process wrong. Now, what do? My background, I learned this the hard way. I was applying to colleges. My parents filed for divorce my senior year, so I didn't do all of the work that I could. I had a lot of distractions. But ultimately, when I found out when I got in college, there were a lot of people paying less for that same tuition than I was. And I also learned that there were things that I could have done that could have cut my cost of college by probably up to 50%, the things that we're here teaching you. Unfortunately, I didn't take advantage of that, and it was really concerning to me that so many people were going to school, some getting lots of discounts, others paying full price, most people having no idea how they got that in the first place. And so we started, when we got into the financial services industry years later, and knowing how much that could have helped my parents in their situation, we realized as we started to work with more and more families, how many families were facing the same issues and how many families were having surprise impact to their retirement in the future by having to pull money out at the worst possible time of accounts that they had been saving for because they didn't have as much as they needed or thought they would need to have for college. So we created a unique approach to help people ultimately find money they were losing unknowingly or unnecessarily, because everybody's got wealth leakage and wealth transfers. This is the thing we focus on. And there's 5 major areas of loss: mortgages, taxes, qualified plans, major capital purchases, like as you see here, cars, weddings, etc. Of course, one of those is also college. And we have done this a long time in working with families. We learned that the way we were planning for college in the beginning was wrong, and that we needed to go about how to do this and understand that planning for college is retirement planning. It is lifestyle planning. But most people, unfortunately, the professionals in the industry say, open a 529 and throw the money into it. And woefully, as you'll see in the statistics, most people haven't saved near enough into that. And it comes with some caveats that don't necessarily always help. Real planning for college takes work and the understanding of someone who has the experience of really tackling this single big issue for families of all generations. So we've done this a long time. We've helped thousands of families who know what we're doing. We go over the framework, Everybody's different, and a lot of that may need to be researched by you. By the way, this is me. I'm being interviewed by Brad Satin. He's with Fox Philadelphia, formerly Fox Minnesota. If anybody's on here from there, you would recognize him. And here is my partner Craig, some articles that he's been publishing. What is this about? Obviously, we're out there. We're getting a voice out. We've been heard in other venues, and maybe bring some credibility to what we're bringing tonight. So again, tonight we're going to learn how to cut costs to the full price published by schools, but also the basic principles on how to finance the rest of college. By the way, a hint, finance is not necessarily what most people think. So let's start with the cost part. And we're going to talk tonight about the 6 key ways, simple ways, that you need to be aware of to cut the cost of college. The first cost-cutting idea is to understand the realities of college pricing. And here's the reality of it. It's like airline pricing. If you raise your hand again, whether silently or over this, if you have ever realized that every seat on a plane is paying a different price. But at least on a plane, you might get a free drink. You might get more leg room, something better. Unfortunately, with college, this is not the case. Everybody is paying a different price, but there's no benefit to paying a different price in college. In fact, the people that do pay more are not guaranteed to get more time, intimate time with professors. They're not guaranteed to get a better degree. They're not guaranteed to get small class sizes. They're guaranteed to get nothing. And therefore, the return on investment of paying more for college is just simply not there. And there's no reason that you should be paying more than you should. And as you can see here in everything that we felt, costs are always going up in all areas. Unfortunately, mostly in the areas that we need. If you look at the chart here, you can see the blue areas are the ones that are going down, and they're mostly things that we want. And unfortunately, we can avoid the things we want, but not necessarily the things we need. College is something that people feel that they need. And if you look at the top of this chart, you can see what you've already felt, that the cost of the things that you need for that, textbooks and college tuition alone, are off the charts more than any other area of major expense. And ultimately, we have to understand our ability to pay and the reality check. We talked about understanding who children are. If you are where you are, this is not necessarily for A students that get help, but you can see that who you are and an understanding of the reality can help to define how you're going to go about and be viewed with schools. So the key here is that you really want to look for schools that are in the top 25% of the incoming class of whatever school you're looking at. So if you're looking at schools where you're not, you're looking at schools that will fairly likely not give you the help you need. And you can see here, bottom 25, bottom of third, or the bottom 25 are going to get gapped unless they can pay full price. So if you can pay the money, the colleges love you. But if you need help and you're looking at schools where you're not in that top half, you're not going to not only get help, you may not get in at all. But if you are looking at schools where you're in that top 50 and even better, the top 25, you can see here that there is a tremendous amount of money that can be potentially available to you at all different levels, regardless of how much money that you make. And that means that most colleges are actually on sale. And that may be a surprise to you, considering all the news about how expensive they are and even what we showed you here. But ultimately, 58% of students at public universities don't pay full price. 88% of students at private universities or schools receive some sort of institutional break. Again, going back to what I said, almost everybody is getting a discount, not just A students, and an awareness of where you're going to be at the front of the class is going to be tremendously helpful in securing even better discounts. In fact, you can see what the impact of a historic high tuition discount of 56% has on the actual cost of college. If a tuition was $45,000 and you put this discount into effect, you could see that the real price would only be $19,000. So again, don't judge a book by its cover. This is proof too that if you are picking schools based on what you have read their tuition price is, you are potentially passing up on schools that actually in the end would have the most money to give you and actually cost less, because it's a buyer's market. And what do we mean by that? It actually means that most schools, unfortunately, the ones that most people haven't heard of, and there's 2,800 schools in this country that are accredited, but most people have heard of the same schools, and 85% of people apply to the same 50 schools. That does not give you much negotiating power. But the reality is that outside of the elites and the research schools that ultimately can demand full price and usually get it, and things like the Ivies, most schools have to work very hard to fill their quota. And as you can see here, 98% of admissions directors are actually concerned about meeting enrollment goals on a year-to-year basis. What does that mean? It means that they are afraid that they're going to have empty seats. Empty seats is no money. And if you're afraid of having an empty seat and getting no money, ask yourself, if you're in business, how willing you would be to give coupons to get someone in that seat as opposed to no one. And that is exactly what's happening in schools. So the number two idea is, okay, so how do you get and how do you even qualify for that financial aid? Well, this comes back to self-awareness. The schools that you target will depend on your answer. The first thing you have to do is you've got to obtain what is called your expected family contribution. Okay, this expected family contribution is ultimately a dollar figure that's assigned to your household that is determined based on what they think you can actually afford to pay for college before the school itself will step up and help you based on your financial need. There's actually several formulas, but the two main ones are FAFSA. You heard me mention that at the beginning. That is the free application for federal student aid. This is the one that almost every school uses, and is the starting domino for almost the entire financial aid process. And this is the one that opened up on October 1st and said, now's the time, seniors, to start giving us your data. They primarily looked at income and non-retirement assets to come up with that number. Now, a handful of more prestigious schools, about 200 private schools, some public, do actually then ask for additional information. And that form, the most common form there, is called the CSS profile. In that regard, they will look at and ask for more information, but those schools typically also have more money to give. And you can see the impact of this as we talk about, as we showed before, that discount. A family that makes $55,000 that has some modest cash and taxable investments and one child going into college with a younger sibling is going to have an expectation that they can afford about $2,500 on both of those formulas that will ultimately look at how much that school might give them in aid. Now, a family with more income, say 150,000, and more assets, including home equity, cash, taxable assets, but otherwise the same demographics, well, you can see here that their EFC would be much higher. And actually, because of what is counted on one versus the other, you can see this time we've got a slightly different number between the federal methodology at 31,000 and the institutional methodology at 35, which ultimately means that when we take a look at this pricing, this is going to be someone who is going to now have an EFC higher than most in-state schools and would still potentially qualify for aid at some private schools that have higher tuition. But still, you may be wanting to look more for schools that offer generous merit aid that does not have anything to do with your income at this level. One thing to note, though, that once that second child gets into college, you'll notice that that EFC gets cut. And there's two different ways that this works. On the federal formula, it actually cuts that number by 50%. Where on the CSS profile, the institutional, it cuts it by 40%. Why does that matter? Because, again, you're probably, if you have two kids going to school, thinking, I can't afford to pay for two kids. Well, if there wasn't going to be any financial aid with one kid in school because the EFC was too high, now with two children in school, you may actually be able to get some need-based aid from schools that otherwise would not have provided them, because now the EFC is lower than a lot more school tuition would be. So again, it can actually be a blessing and a curse to have more than one child in college. Now, there are some changes that are happening in the laws around how these formulas get calculated and cut. So in the next couple of years, there may be some significant impact to that. But for now, 2021, this is how this works. Now, if we were to take a look at those EFCs and say, okay, what happens if a school has a lower tuition? Compare here this example of a $58,000 in-state public university versus a EFC of $65,000. Because the EFC is higher, there would be no demonstrated need and therefore nothing given by that school for financial aid or financial payability reasons. Now, on the other hand, if you see a private school of 58,000, but the family has an EFC of 35, well, being lower, that is a demonstrated need of 23,000. And in this case, that family would be eligible for some need-based financial aid. However, again, with an EFC this high, probably better looking at schools that provide generous merit aid. So again, in summary, if you have a small expected family contribution, look for colleges that provide generous need-based aid. And if you have a larger expected family contribution, fear not, there is still plenty of money that you can get, but you're going to want to look for colleges that give good merit aid to many students. Now, the third idea is to use net price calculators. We might be asking what that is. Well, this is going to tell you what the true price of college is after they give you that free money that you're hoping for. So I said in the beginning that if all these schools are giving discounts, it may not make any sense for you to eliminate schools based on that sticker price. Again, United States is one of the few countries where we walk into a store, we see the price, and we pay what it is. If anybody on this is from elsewhere in the world, you know that negotiating never stops. And that's kind of how it works with college. So if you were to take a look at a cost of a school and find that that school says it is worth maybe $50,000, and you avoided that school, you may have missed out on an opportunity to actually have a great experience and a cheaper school because you would have not realized that maybe that school offers half off in terms of tuition, of scholarships and grants. How do you know that? Well, what was infuriating about this in the past is you didn't really get the financial aid awards from schools until right before you had to make a commitment of May 1st of their senior year. The good news is these net price calculators are available. You can Google the school and net price calculator. By the way, one of the things we help a lot of families with is determining the EFC because 9 out of 10 people make mistakes filing it that cost them money. And we also help people figure out what the net price is because we have net price calculators, which can be very difficult to find, even though they're out there. But if you do use these net price calculators, they will tell you what the true cost will be after that free money is applied. Ultimately, it's your chance to peek behind the curtain, and it is critical before you use these, before your child gets excited about any school, because once they get excited, parents, it's hard to get them to go into a different direction. And if it's a school that you didn't realize was unaffordable, it may be very difficult for you to avoid to raise the question of not going to that school. So before you begin to look at schools, it's imperative that you understand what those net prices could be so you can find schools that are affordable. Now, it takes some detective work, but you also have to be aware, like I said, one of the reasons we help a lot of families with this, and we have a special offer later in tonight for this, is that, hey, there's some bad calculators out there. There are calculators that ultimately will give you erroneous results, that they will only rely on federal calculator template, which doesn't actually take into consideration the free money that people need. It just asks a couple of questions. A good calculator should be asking for you to have your tax returns and get specific data off those returns. And it doesn't calculate, like I said, the ability to know what that true cost is. So you got to be very careful when you look at these net price calculators that you're looking at one that's actually telling you what the true net price would be. Now, what's the fourth thing we need to look at? Where's the money coming from? Okay. Well, there's 4 main areas that money gets given to families. Number 1 is the federal government. You'll see that knocking on the door right behind it is actually the colleges themselves. Now, a much smaller allocation of money is from private scholarships, only 11%, and state governments at only 7%. Okay. Now, the federal government, well, this is one that is the biggest provider, but it is mostly provided in grants for lower income. As such, you can see that the biggest area is the Pell Grant program. And the Pell Grant program is certainly not lucrative financial aid. The max that it gives is $6,095 in current school year. And to qualify, you must have under $25,000 AGI. In fact, for 90% of people who have received Pell Grants actually have AGIs under $50,000. So this is built to primarily support. But for lower income. But however, federal loans are still available because they do not have income limitations to be able to access federal loans, which is another part of that program. Now, state aid is an area grants that is very much something that people have access to, but it's in smaller doses, smaller availability, and it really differentiates. It differs state to state. So when you take a look at state university aid, typically what you're going to find is that for some reason in the north, those state grants are offered to families who are of lower income, similar to the Pell Grants. But when you get into the South, they tend to be offered based on merit. So higher academic achievement is what can qualify for state grants. Now, I know a lot of people out there think that private scholarships are going to be the key to financial freedom, and the reality is that it can be a catch-22, and there can be a trap on it. So first of all, most of the private scholarships that you see out there that are published are incredibly competitive. So it tends to be a very small source of money in the first place. They also tend to be very competitive, meaning hard to get. The Coca-Cola scholars, for example, 25 times harder to win than just getting accepted into Stanford, which is one of the hardest schools in America to get into. So that may be a lot of time spent with very little results. But the catch-22 on this as well is that if you are trying to get need-based aid, remember lower EFC, and you're getting need-based aid from a higher tuition school, they look at everything you have, and that means they are looking at money from outside sources, which can include these private scholarships. So unfortunately, if you do need these scholarships financially and you do qualify for need-based aid, you could have your need-based aid from schools taken away from you by the amount you've received in private scholarships. So be very, very careful if you are applying for need-based aid from colleges that you don't apply for these and find out if private scholarships will affect their aid. Now, ironically, those that may not need the financial aid as much, that may be qualifying for money based on merit, well, merit money is not tied to the money you have, and therefore private scholarships are absolutely not a problem for those families that need it the least. So it is unfortunate how that works. The other thing is the best scholarships are probably going to be local scholarships that are not in national databases. You can check your libraries, check local schools, check the newspapers in your local area. They tend to be, since they're not published nationally, they tend to have a lot less people fill out applications for them, raising your chance of winning. In addition, a lot of students don't like doing essays, so a lot of times you'll find more success when you look at scholarships that require essays, because these students will not get near as many applications because students don't want to do the essay. And I have seen plenty of examples where families have applied, and the student that decided to apply to that scholarship was the only one and automatically won it. Okay, there's some other scholarships out there. Capex.com, CAPPEX.com is a great site to look for institutional scholarships that have been left, and these tend to be in areas of vocation, of arts, of sciences, of achievement. You can see here the Eagle Scout Award, and there's a lot of money out there that it can be provided to families based off of achievements in certain areas. So again, another area where there may be a tremendous access to scholarships could be from institutions themselves. Now, looking at institutional merit and financial aid, one thing to know is that we talked about the difference between EFC and the tuition. Whatever the difference is between the EFC and tuition is demonstrated need, and that means a school may step up and help you with providing financial aid for that gap. But also be aware that every school provides a different level of amount of money for that gap. And there's only about 6 dozen schools in the country that actually provide 100% coverage for demonstrated need. And they are often the most elite schools. They typically give very little merit aid for anything else. They are the hardest to get into. So if you can get a discount scholarship at one of these schools and get in, consider yourself having hit the academic financial lottery. You can see a list of similar schools that offer very little outside of need-based aid. Again, many of these are some very considered prestigious schools. By the way, the Latin root for the word prestigious is actually to deceive. So don't be fooled that prestigious means a better outcome. They've just done a really good job of marketing why you should pay full price. And if you don't qualify for merit, for need-based aid at these elite schools, you're going to pay full price because they got plenty of people that will. So the key thing here is cast a wider net. I mentioned earlier, 85% of kids applying to the same 50 schools. Those 50 schools have so many candidates. Why would they give coupons? And the other thing too is to understand that a lot of your big research schools are going to be schools that are going to be less likely to give a really intimate, supportive experience for your child on campus. The truth is that your undergraduate degree is where you go to school is of very little importance. What matters is how well you do when you're there, and if that school does have a decent major in the area you're looking at. The career matters. Unfortunately, people pick a lot of schools looking, hey, they're the best, they're elite for these things, but research schools, their number one and number two priority is meant to teach grad students and to sell research, which means they don't have much time at all and are actually encouraged not to spend much time with your student. So if you're looking for more money, more intimacy, more support, it may be best to also check out master's level universities and colleges that do very little with teaching graduates and very little with research. And you can see the amount of discounts available to those types of schools far exceeds what's available at those research schools. Athletic scholarships, a lot of families want to know about athletic scholarships. Talk about them for a bit. They are one of the smallest areas of money that is available, and you can see here they're one of the hardest scholarships to get. Of the million players out there playing men's football, get that for a second, 1 million college football, 1 million players playing football. There's only a 2.4% chance of getting a scholarship in that sport. Of women's track, 600,000 women's track runners, only 1.7% are getting any chance at getting a scholarship. And there's only a couple of sports that really give the money. These are called head count sports. They provide full ride scholarships in football, men's and women's basketball, women's volleyball, women's golf, and women's tennis. Basically, you either get a full ride scholarship, and we've heard about that if anybody follows football, you hear about the kids that are on scholarship. But if you don't get a scholarship, you get nothing in that area. The rest of sports out there, what we call equivalency sports, meaning they don't give much money at all. They're not going to be a very big portion of the financial aid that you're going to be hoping that you get, but at least you can maybe get something. Okay, you want to research the generosity of colleges. You can use College Board to do that, to look at what those colleges are actually offering in terms of, hey, this kind of comes back to those net price calculators. Again, something that we do for a lot of families and help them with, because they want to know, hey, if I go to the school, what might I get? Well, you can see here, Yale will give about 100% of what you need. They're one of those 6 dozen schools. If you have a gap between your EFC and the tuition, and that translates to about $54,000 to $55,000 in average need-based scholarships or grants. But notice there is nothing there for merit aid. So if you can qualify to pay full price, you will. New York University is a poor example of everything. They just don't give money. I don't recommend them for financial reasons because they only meet about half the need of families out there that actually can't afford it. But they also only give on average about $7,000 to those that actually qualify based on merit. So in the end, families that look at NYU, almost anybody is going to pay a significant portion of their posted tuition price. Now, here's an example of a school that gives a large merit scholarship. This is Hendrix College. They do meet generous need-based support, but they also give an average of about $28,000 discount to anybody who applies. Why is that? Well, they're in Arkansas. So being in Arkansas, beautiful campus, great school, they, though, are not on those lists that people pull to say, okay, that are right, that, like University of Colorado, where, hey, we got plenty of kids that want to ski. So Hendrix College has to give more money to entice people to look at their school, and it's a fantastic school with fantastic results and outcomes for its students, but also at a very fantastic and generous price. Last it is imperative you check 4-year graduation rates. I mentioned the 5-year graduation rates that are in the beginning of this webinar, and you can see here that there are a tremendous number of people that are going to college. And unfortunately, from those rates, we are finding that there is a very low, as I mentioned, almost 30% of kids are graduating from state schools, and only 50% of kids are graduating from private schools in 4 years. That means 5 years and 6 years are not rare. They're not the exception. It's sadly more common than it should be. And that can be a tremendously painful financial impact on parents, because financial aid only goes for the first 4. So any additional years can cost as much or more than the first 4 did. Okay, very quickly it can add up. You can see an example here of a high graduation rate. Yale will post that 96.9% of their individual or class graduates, but notice here that's actually in 6 years. And if you use U.S. News and World Reports to look at risk school rankings, you are unfortunately going to find very quickly that U.S. News and World Report is using 6-year graduation rates, not the 4 that you're expecting. The reality is still decent. About 88% graduate within 4 from Yale. But San Diego State, on the other hand, they would post that 66% of our students graduate on time. The reality is, in the 4 years that people expect, it's only 32. So it is very important to know what those 4-year graduation rates, and you can see a big difference on this list. Kind of hard to see, but I will note my partner Craig's on here. University of Arizona, only 40% graduate on time. San Jose State is 8%. Private schools tend to have better graduation rates in 4 years than public schools across the board. I said it before, I'll say it again. The most important thing that you need to do to start this domino is you need to know what your EFC is. If you don't understand your EFC, you can't even begin to figure out what the true cost of college is going to be, and we can help you with that. So got an offer for you that's going to be coming up here shortly that will give you a way that we can help you get your EFC, especially if you have a senior and your time is wasting before you actually file FAFSA here shortly. We can help you with that so that you can do it right, because accuracy is better than haste, because if you're wrong, it can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. And of course, if you're going to have your EFC, you've got to get those net prices. As you can see here, a $61,000 school ultimately could give about $26,000 in scholarships and grants. That makes that school tremendously more affordable. So it is important to know that based on that EFC, based on what the schools you're looking at is, based on merit aid that's out there, what could you potentially be getting as a true price to these colleges so that you can begin to budget. Now I'm going to segue a little bit. We've spent most of this time looking at what I call the bottom of the iceberg, okay, or the top of the iceberg, the part that we can see. But financial planning is a massive iceberg that we are all heading towards. We are all in looking at how do we get past this thing without getting shipwrecked. But with icebergs, the real biggest part of the iceberg is generally underwater. The part we've been talking about is how to reduce the cost. Scholarships, pricing, discounts, and grants. The real problem for most people is how they're planning to pay for college. And this is an area where most people don't have a clue and really need the help, because paying for it incorrectly can actually be costing you more than you think. And the biggest problem with college that really has us frustrated as planners and actually fairly angry about it is that the government about 10 years ago took over student loans. And when they took over student loans, instead of just backing them, they basically told all the schools that we will give money to anybody. And along with low interest rates, it created a massive college cash grab, hence the spike in college tuition. But the reality for the rest of the world is income has remained stagnant. You pay for more than you ever did. You need a plan, a strategy to finance and pay for college. And most people that we've talked to just don't have that. How you pay is the most important solution. So let's talk about financing. I said in the beginning, I'm going to teach you a different way of thinking about it. Financing, most people think it means to borrow and pay interest. And this is true. It is a piece of it. But financing is actually purchasing anything. You either finance by borrowing money and paying interest, or you use your cash flow and savings and you give up the ability to earn interest. Okay. So what happens is there are basically three types of people that handle money. The spender is the debtor. They go into debt and they spend years trying to pay that off, and it impacts their cash flow in order to achieve it. Then they basically live and borrow below the zero line. Okay. If you're in that situation, the first thing you got to do is get out of debt and stay out of debt. Now, the saver, the one is the opposite of that. It's where, hey, I'm not a debtor anymore. I pay for everything in cash, and that's exactly what you can see that they do. They take their money and they grow their money up and grow their money up, and then what happens? They're ready to make that purchase and they spend it. Well, when they spend that money, they get back down to the zero line, and once you're at the zero line, you are basically back to nothing. So what happens is you basically avoid the interest that you would pay by borrowing, but unfortunately, you get nothing on the money that you saved. And so you lose any potential once you spend it of what that money could continue to become. Now, let's talk about the billionaires for a second, okay? And really quickly, there's some articles that came about how very little they pay in taxes. And as you can see here, Elon Musk is doing something wrong because he's paying almost 300% more taxes than Michael Bloomberg and thousands times more taxes than Warren Buffett and Jeff Bezos. But let's face it, any one of them is barely paying anything. Why is it? Because their total income reported based on their wealth is incredibly small. Okay. And if they're now they're still paying taxes, obviously, more than any of us, but they are being able to keep the total tax rate low and make lots more money on their wealth as it grows. How are they doing that? Well, they don't take a lot of income, and they know that if they sell their assets, they can always do that to live off capital gains. But the reality is they're not selling their assets because they realize, if you see here, that if I can grow my wealth, says Warren Buffett, by $24 billion, and I've only got 125 million in income to report, I don't have to sell my assets to live. Okay. I'm going to keep that growing. So what they're doing is they are the green line. The green line says, I am just going to keep my asset growing and growing and growing. And let's say that is 10% a year. Okay. Well, if they know that when they are looking at that situation thinking, I can have my wealth grow at 10%, but I'm seeing that I can borrow at only, say, 3%, that is a 7% spread between these two. And they're making 7% on every dollar. So what they are seeing is, look, we are going to obviously earn, borrow, and live above the zero line. We are going to ultimately grow our money and keep growing it if it's making money for us, and use other people's money and be our own bank when it makes sense in order to secure greater wealth. Because what they're able to do is eventually, when they pay it off, they are worth more than when they began. Now, this is something that is absolutely capable for anybody. And if we take a look at college, one example is, how do we pay for it? Do we take, and we see it, let's say $30,000 has to be spent in year one, and you look at that $30,000 cost and you ask yourself, okay, what do I do on this $30,000 cost? Do I take my money that I've saved up and spend it? Well, you could. And if you do, you will see here that ultimately over time, by spending your money, you could save $17,000 in interest. That feels good because interest, you may be able to borrow student loans at 5%. But if you are making money on that, and I talk to families all the time that have money in 529s, they're saying, look, I'm getting 8 to 10% a year. Well, if you're getting 8 to 10% a year, let's just say it's 6, and it's 1% more than you can borrow. Well, you can see here on this line that we're looking at that ultimately, over the course of time, 20 years, which is a typical borrowing, while it might cost you $17,000 in interest, you can make $69,000 in interest by keeping it. And if you can keep that, guess what? You just made in interest 2 times what the cost of the tuition was for that year, and you are ultimately still sitting on the original 30, and you end up with $99,000 at a cost of 17. Ask yourself if you would not take basically a $80,000 profit on any financial decision you make. Now, if you were to take a look at 4 years of this on that same kind of spread, a cost, yes, there's a cost of borrowing other people's money. It's $75,000, but you could make $300,000, and that ultimately is money back in your pocket. That is $300,000. That is the price of putting 2 kids through school. That is the price of a house that you can make by managing your money the right way. This is the financial collage. This is your future. This is the retirement scholarship. And this is something that our clients are very interested in, because ultimately, if you could pay for college and still ultimately have, as you see here, $400,000 available after paying for college to live your retirement and your future will be more secure than it ever could have been had you not looked at where your wealth transfer was occurring. You got to put your money, if you're going to do this, in the right thing. But ultimately, people they know the government's taking taxes. So taxes deferment is important. Tax-free is important. Ultimately, if you're going to have your money growing, you don't want to lose that money. That's important. You want to be able to have the ability to put enough money in to make it work. You want to be able to deduct if you can. Ultimately, be able to use that money in liquidity, use, and control, which is really what this is all about. Because once you give that money to the mortgage lender, once you give that money to the bank, the college, that money is gone and it's lost forever. You lose total control of it. But if we go back and take a look at this scenario here, even though there might be a loan, by year 6, 7, 8, or 9, we may already have enough, in maybe by year 11, to have enough growth on that money to have paid off college and pay off everything if you want early. Now, but if you don't, and you just let it ride to the end, you can see it's all about the control of being able to allow your money to continue to do what it needs to do in order to allow you to be financially successful for the future. Give me 1 second. I got a battery issue I got to fix. We're live, and that can only, sometimes things roll when you are rolling in a live situation. So let me fix that technical issue here and make sure we stay on, because you do not want to lose me for the end of this. All right, now getting back to what this means, you've got to save money. You got to save money for college. Whether you save it for the future and you leverage it, or you basically pay college off, you need to be able to save. So here's an area of places you can save: 529s, Coverdales, UTMAs, stocks, mutual funds, Roth IRAs. There's lots of places. They all have pros and cons that you get based on those areas that we talked about. So again, it's about having a conversation about your situation, about what it is that you need, what's going to work best for you to make your money work the best for you. And as I said before, 529 plans, there's been people who have saved for them and they've been surprised at how little their 529 plans have grown to keep up with the cost of college. In fact, in the 21 years that they've been in use, the average is only $10,000, well below what's needed for college. They also have issues with flexibility. You are required to spend it. That kills that compounding interest that we were talking about. You also have to count them against the financial aid that you're getting for need. And by the way, if your grandparents own and give you money, that counts too. So they work, they have some advantages, but unfortunately also have some restrictions and challenges that most people aren't aware of, that in the end may not make them as the ideal tank that people think. So in summary, you finance everything you buy, including college. So what's the best way for you to finance it? The secret is maybe to leverage other people's money if you can earn more than the cost. And ultimately, traditional methods of paying may ultimately leave you with less for retirement than you need. So what's next for you? And how do you implement tactics easily? Okay. Well, ultimately, what I want to hear is, I want to hear from families that they've picked schools because they love the career path, they love the major, they love the professors, they get the support, and they're getting lots of discounts, as Stacy and Frisco mentioned in one of our testimonials. Ultimately, as I said, 32,000 other reasons why this was the financial aid that she received for her family by picking a great school. So we've got to pick the right schools in the beginning and get the cost down, and then figure out the best way to pay for it. And if you're a business owner that makes over $180,000, there's actually some really efficient tax deductible ways that you can also do to basically get, and legal. Government writes the rules for this. Use that money and write it off for tuition reimbursement. Ultimately, you need to know how these financial aid works for you. You need to know which schools have money, which do not. You need to know if you can afford to put money towards college, or if you still need it for your retirement. Are you ready? You've got to minimize mistakes on forums, negotiate to get schools to give you more money, and then ultimately understand the full iceberg, the cost, the financing, etc. So what do you get? So we talked about this early in the beginning. First of all, we're going to open up here in a couple minutes. We're going to have some questions. This is definitely something you can do yourself, but it can take a lot of time. This college planning process takes a family who's doing the work they need as much as 200 hours of time. Okay, so one thing the families are looking for is, how do I find time in my life? How do I make this easier and still get the results? That's something that we specialize in. Also, some families just have a question here and there about things that are going on in their situation. We need to look and understand before we can even advise if what you're doing makes sense. So we offer a free gift to you. It's a $200 value for our time, just to talk, answer some questions, 30 minutes. Take advantage of that. There is no obligation or cost for that time, but it can solve a lot of questions and concerns. We also have a customized college plan, okay? Here's what you can get. It's very, very simple. You can know how much college could cost you. You can compare up to 3 schools that you could qualify for to see how much you would get in grants or aid, how much you'd have to pay out of pocket, and potential ways to achieve cost. Now, this one we have a cost for ourselves. We normally charge $67 for it, but go check it out. We have a coupon code right now for a significant savings on this. It's 20, now 12. You can use that to get an instant report with your EFC and the cost, the net price of up to 3 different colleges you may be considering, which may be the 3 colleges you're already looking at for school. But even more, we've got some really nice things to offer, just some good free information. The 6 factors that predict a student's college success. It's important if you know that, if you're going to pick schools they are going to thrive in, and there is absolutely a correlation that the small percentage of students that have achieved the key support and key experience in areas that have been outlined in this report, they were more than 2 times more engaged in college and continue to be more than 2 times more engaged in their outcomes. So again, if you're going to pay this money for college, do you want to have a big paperweight, or do you really want to have a degree that's valuable? We're also going to help give you some information on how to evaluate awards letters, because once you get them, how would you know if they're good? And that's, again, a valuable resource that everybody should take advantage of it. And also how to craft an essay that will delight an admissions officer. Okay. Again, these essays are going to be a big key area that colleges are going to look at to both acceptance and scholarships. But also, if you can craft an essay well, you also increase your chances of doing well on local scholarships. So again, that could be right there. Just learning how to craft a great essay could be something that returns thousands of dollars of value to you. We really are downplaying this, that the stuff that we just talked about is ultimately about $1,000 in value that we're basically giving to you mostly for free tonight, other than a small amount for that report if you're looking for it. So ultimately, it's giving you the opportunity for saving money, saving time, and a future that's rewarding for both you and your child. A feeling that you're going to be able to help your child, and ultimately know that you can take a big step from wherever you are and to being able to have the information you need to make some very critical decisions, whether you've got time left or you're right up against a deadline. So I'm going to leave this here with the final slide with the information we talked about, your ability to get those reports, your ability to get those free items, your ability to set a time to talk to us. And again, I'm going to go ahead and begin to look at some of the questions. I see that there are some people that have joined it. I see there's a freshman in college. Thank you very much for somebody that put that onto our comments board. If you're still here listening, looks like Ahmed, you are ready. Okay. I don't know when this.
All right, everyone. Hey, listen, that was a great event that Doug talks about all the college planning that goes into it. There's a ton of information, as you can tell. What I did is I went ahead and put up the slide that talks about the College Money Report, the 30-minute talk, and the free stuff. So make sure you get that um, as well. So a couple questions that came through is that you need to know is that we get a lot is, are the SAT and ACT tests optional? And a lot of times it depends on the school. They'll say they're optional. We don't require it. But I always tell people, look, if you have a child that has a GPA unweighted of, let's say, I don't know, 4.25 on a 5.0 scale, wherever they have it, but it's weighted about 3.5 or 3.6, right? And let's say they have an application for another student that's very, very equivalent, but your student took an ACT or SAT and the other one didn't. Well, the better choice is, if it's a competitive spot, is to take the student that has the standardized test. What if they don't score well? Well, that's okay, because the scoring well just depends on the type of test. So we always say, well, have you taken the strength test to find out if they should take the ACT or SAT? Because they are different standardized tests. So that's the one thing we tell you to do, is find the strength of your child and make sure that they are taking the right exam. And you can always take it again before you apply too. Another question I wrote down here, somebody sent in here, there's a lot of things about the sandwich generation. So a lot of people think they can't get more aid if their expected family contribution number is really high. But let's say you're like me, a sandwich generation, and you have elderly parents, right? Let's say some people, their parents moved in with them. They have to take care of them or support them because they don't have enough, right? Well, I tell people all the time, look, you can ask for what's called a judgment. And what that does is it tells the school, look, I've got expenses that they don't appear the way it needs that right on my application, because there's no place to put in there that I have dependent parents. Right now, usually your tax return will usually show that stuff up a lot. But remember that dependent parents can count in the FAFSA or in the EFC, but it's not going to be calculated as part of the FAFSA. Where you're going to get that is from the school and asking them for judgment. So there's always things that you can do. That's part of the appeal process. Only your part of the assets are done. There's lots of questions that people have about divorces. So, and those questions are much more in depth and detail. But divorces, alimony, and different sort of funds for calculating FAFSA, EFCs, it depends and where you place it. So that's one of the most important things that y'all have to know, is exactly where to place things in the FAFSA application. And that's open right now. Key point about the FAFSA is the earlier you are, the better off you are to get merit aid. A lot of times what you want to do is make sure that you take your time doing it. It's very important that you don't commit to things early, or that you rush through the process, because it'll ultimately hurt you. You do have to fill out the FAFSA every single year, though. So it's one of those things that is imperative that you take care of on an annual basis. Okay, 2 kids in school, for instance, on a FAFSA means that you split the costs, and the colleges know you're going to have 2 kids in schools. You got to have 2 tuition payments, so it reduces your expected family contribution, basically cuts it in half. So what I want you guys to think about is using us as a resource or a tool, downloading the information you see on the screen, looking at the College Money Report, doing that. Get that product, and there's a code on it, like I said, that we published there. 20 now 12 is what it is. But if you need any help, you can email support@procollegeplanners.com. You can call us as well. Book a talk with us. If you have questions, I had a good 30-minute conversation with a family business owner, and they're really taking the plunge with their junior, saying, I want to know how to do this the right way, so they don't have to sacrifice their retirement, or thinking about, at some point, hey, look, if you're becoming an empty nester, right? The term for get out of school, your kids are finished with your high school, they go to college, you're kind of an empty nester at that point. So the question is for you, do you want to be able to pull back in your own life at some point being able to step out of your work instead of spending all your money in school. We can help you with that too. That's very, very important for you guys to know that we have those resources. Okay. If nobody has, I don't have any other questions pending. So I'm going to leave this up for a little bit. You guys can screen scrape that and or take a picture with your camera, photo it, scan it, book a time with us. We're here. It's getting pretty busy, so we book a time early. And if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to ask. We're here for you guys. Thank you much. Good night.